The Lost Teachings. A Path to True Awakening. The rain drummed softly against the stained glass windows of St. Peter's Monastery. Its rhythmic tapping the only sound in the dimly lit library. Father Elijah, an aging scholar with deep-set eyes and a mind sharpened by years of theological study, sat hunched over a centuries-old manuscript. His trembling fingers traced the faded ink of an ancient scroll, its contents rumored to contain lost teachings of Jesus, words that had never been recorded in the canonical Gospels. It had been a lifetime of searching, hidden within the archives of forgotten monasteries, buried beneath the weight of time, and obscured by the politics of early Christendom. These teachings were said to hold the key to a deeper, more personal connection with the divine. Unlike the scriptures that spoke in parables and doctrine, these words were direct guidance for the soul seeking true enlightenment. Elijah had dedicated decades to unraveling the mystery, following clues left by early Christian mystics who believed Jesus had shared sacred wisdom not meant for the masses, but for those prepared to receive it. Now, after years of piecing together fragmented texts from the deserts of Egypt to the hidden catacombs beneath Rome, he was finally at the precipice of discovery. The words on the scroll, though worn with age, were unmistakable. The kingdom of God is not in temples of stone, nor in the hands of the rulers, but within the stillness of your heart. Seek not power over men, but mastery over self. In surrender, you shall find freedom. In silence, you shall hear my voice. Elijah's breath caught in his throat. If these teachings were true, they could change everything: the way people prayed, the way they sought God, the very foundation of organized faith. But would the world be ready to listen? The candlelight flickered against the ancient stone walls of the monastery's hidden library. Father Elijah's breath was steady but heavy, his fingers tracing the brittle edges of a scroll that had lain undisturbed for centuries. The script was faded yet legible, written in a form of Aramaic that only a few scholars in the world could decipher. With each line he translated, his heart pounded against his ribs. These words, so raw, so untouched by time, held a meaning that could shake the very foundation of what he had been taught his whole life. He had spent decades studying theology, teaching others about the divine nature of Christ's message, yet nowhere in the Church's teachings had he encountered ideas like these. The kingdom of God is not in temples of stone, nor in the voices of men who claim dominion over souls, but within the silent depths of your being. Elijah sat back, his thoughts spiraling. If this text was authentic, it was nothing less than revolutionary. It suggested that Jesus had spoken of a direct, unmediated connection to God, one that required no priest, no hierarchy, no rigid doctrine. The implications were staggering. The Church had structured its teachings around obedience, around the necessity of intercessors between man and God, but this text suggested otherwise. It spoke of personal transformation, of spiritual mastery, of a divine presence that existed in the stillness of every human heart. A sudden creak of wood made Elijah flinch. He looked up sharply, his fingers reflexively rolling the scroll closed. In the dim candlelight, a familiar face emerged from the shadows. Brother Marcus. Marcus, a young monk with an inquisitive mind, approached cautiously. "Father, you're still here?" His voice was hushed, yet tinged with curiosity. Elijah hesitated. The library was meant to be locked at night. Marcus should not have been here. And yet, Elijah had long sensed that the younger man was different from the others, less inclined to blind obedience, more open to questioning the nature of faith itself. "Come," Elijah said at last, motioning him forward. "There is something you must see." Marcus stepped closer, his gaze drawn to the old parchment in Elijah's hands. His eyes widened as he scanned the ancient text. "What is this?" he whispered. "A truth that has been hidden for centuries," Elijah said gravely. He tapped a line on the scroll. "Read this." Marcus obeyed, his voice barely above a breath. "Seek not power over men, but mastery over self." Silence hung between them. Marcus swallowed hard. This changes everything." Elijah nodded. "It does. And that is why it was buried." He reached for another fragment of parchment, one he had retrieved from the depths of the monastery's archives. The ink had faded with time, but the meaning remained clear. It spoke of a journey, of secret teachings preserved by those who had walked closest with Jesus, not the apostles who had built the early church, but a sect of mystics who had lived in the deserts of Judea. The Essenes, Marcus murmured as he read. Elijah met his gaze. Some believed they were the keepers of Christ's most intimate teachings, the ones he shared only with those ready to understand. Marcus's hands trembled as he placed the parchment down. Father, if this is true, then everything we've been taught has been incomplete. Elijah took a deep breath. That is why we must go. A tense pause followed. Then, with a single nod, Marcus made his decision. We leave tonight. The journey into the unknown. The desert air was sharp against their skin as they rode beneath a moonlit sky. The monastery's stone walls had vanished behind them hours ago, and now only the endless stretch of sand and rock remained. Elijah and Marcus traveled light. They carried only a few provisions, dried figs, bread, and water skins, along with the ancient map Elijah had uncovered. It was old, its ink smudged in places, but it showed the path to Qumran, the legendary home of the Essenes. For hours, they rode in silence, the only sound the rhythmic steps of their horses against the rocky terrain. The stars above stretched endlessly, their light cold and distant. Then, as dawn began to break, Marcus finally spoke. Father, do you think these teachings were hidden because they were dangerous? Elijah kept his gaze ahead. Not dangerous, he said carefully, but powerful. And power in the wrong hands can be twisted. Marcus considered this. The church teaches that without structure, without guidance, faith can become chaos. Do you think the church was wrong? Elijah sighed. Not wrong, Marcus, but perhaps incomplete. The younger monk fell silent, contemplating the implications of those words. By midday, the heat became unbearable. The sun scorched the earth beneath them, and their water skins were already growing light. They found shelter beneath a cluster of crumbling ruins, perhaps an old Roman outpost, abandoned centuries ago. Elijah wiped the sweat from his brow, then unrolled the map. He traced their path with his finger. We're close, he murmured. Marcus leaned in. How can you be sure? Elijah pointed to a marking on the map, an ancient symbol. A sun enclosed within a circle. This is the emblem of the Essenes. If we're reading this correctly, then the entrance to their hidden archives lies within a cave near the cliffs ahead. Excitement flickered in Marcus's eyes. Then we must go now. But Elijah hesitated. Something about this felt too easy, too convenient. They had traveled far, yet there had been no signs of obstacles. No signs that this path had been guarded or protected. If the Essenes had truly preserved such sacred knowledge, surely they would not have left it unguarded. Patience, Elijah said at last. We wait until nightfall. It is safer that way. Marcus frowned but nodded. As darkness fell, they set out once more. The land grew eerily quiet, as if the desert itself was holding its breath. The cliffs loomed ahead, jagged against the night sky. Then they saw it, a small, narrow opening at the base of the rock face. A cave. Elijah and Marcus exchanged a look. This is it, Elijah whispered. But as they stepped forward, a gust of wind howled through the air, carrying with it the unmistakable sound of whispered voices. Not the wind, not an illusion. The voices of those who had long since passed, warning them of what lay ahead. Elijah took a deep breath, steadying his nerves. The whispers that floated through the air were not of the living. They were echoes, remnants of something ancient, something powerful. Marcus clutched his cloak tightly, his eyes darting between the cave entrance and Elijah. Are you sure about this? His voice was barely above a whisper, as if speaking too loudly would summon whatever spirit still lingered here. Elijah exhaled, forcing his fear aside. The truth is never easy to find, he murmured, but we cannot turn back now. With slow, deliberate steps, they entered the cave. The air inside was thick with the scent of earth and time. A mixture of dust, damp stone, and something else, something unidentifiable but ancient. Their torches flickered against the uneven walls, casting dancing shadows that seemed almost alive. As they moved deeper into the passage, Marcus ran his fingers along the rock. These walls, they aren't natural. Someone carved them. Elijah nodded. This was no ordinary cave. It was shaped by human hands. Long ago, the passage twisted and turned, leading them downward, deeper into the unknown. Then, after what felt like an eternity, they emerged into a vast underground chamber. Marcus gasped. By the heavens, before them stood towering shelves of stone, filled with scrolls and manuscripts. The sheer number of them was staggering, hundreds, perhaps thousands of texts, each one a thread in the fabric of history that had been hidden away from the world. Elijah's hands trembled as he approached the nearest shelf. He reached out, brushing his fingertips against the aged parchment of a scroll. The writing was in an ancient form of Hebrew, delicate yet precise. "This is it," he whispered, "the lost teachings." Marcus moved beside him, eyes wide with awe. "Father, do you realize what this means? These texts, they could change everything." Elijah nodded solemnly. "Yes, and that is why they were hidden. The forbidden knowledge for hours." They pored over the scrolls, carefully unrolling them and translating the words inscribed upon their fragile surfaces. The teachings within them were unlike anything they had ever encountered. One scroll spoke of the inner temple, a concept vastly different from the structured doctrines of the church. It described the human soul as a sacred place where the divine resided, independent of any physical church or institution. The true temple is not built by hands, nor sustained by gold, but exists within the heart of every living soul. Seek not the approval of men, but the quiet whisper of the divine within. Marcus stared at the words, his breath shallow. This means that salvation isn't found through rituals or obedience to a religious order, but through personal transformation. Elijah nodded, his mind racing. It explains why these teachings were suppressed. If people understood this, they would not need intermediaries to connect with God. Another scroll spoke of spiritual mastery, the idea that faith was not about blind belief, but about discipline, inner awakening, and deep personal connection with the divine. Faith without understanding is like a lamp without oil. It may shine for a moment, but it cannot endure the night. Elijah ran a hand through his graying hair. The church teaches that faith alone is enough. But this suggests that faith must be cultivated, strengthened through wisdom and self-discipline. Marcus swallowed. No wonder these texts were hidden. The watchers in the dark. A sudden noise made both men freeze. A whisper, a movement, then footsteps. Someone else was in the cave. Elijah extinguished the torch quickly, plunging them into darkness. Marcus stifled a gasp. They crouched low behind one of the stone shelves, their hearts pounding. The footsteps grew closer. Then a voice, low, deliberate, "You should not be here." A figure emerged from the shadows, cloaked in the same darkness that surrounded them. His face was hidden, but his presence was undeniable, commanding, ancient, and filled with authority. Elijah slowly rose, his hands open to show he meant no harm. "We seek only knowledge," he said carefully. The figure studied him for a long moment. Then he spoke again. "Knowledge is power, and power, in the wrong hands, destroys." Elijah felt Marcus tense beside him. "Who are you?" Marcus demanded. The figure tilted his head. "A guardian, one of many. We have watched over these teachings for centuries, ensuring they do not fall into hands that would twist them for their own gain." Elijah hesitated. "We do not wish to corrupt them," he said sincerely. "We only wish to understand." The guardian was silent for a moment. Then he stepped forward, lifting a hand to touch one of the scrolls. "These words were given to those who were ready," he said. "Few in history have been worthy. Many have sought this knowledge, but most did not understand the responsibility that came with it." Marcus swallowed hard. "Are we worthy?" The guardian's eyes, barely visible beneath the hood, bore into them. "That remains to be seen." The final test. The guardian extended his hand toward Elijah. "You have studied much, but knowledge alone is not enough." Elijah hesitated, then reached out. The moment their hands touched, a surge of energy coursed through him. His vision blurred, and suddenly he was no longer in the cave. Instead, he stood in the midst of a great storm, lightning crackling in the sky above. Before him was a massive temple, not one built of stone, but one that seemed to pulse with light and energy, as though it were alive. A voice, deep and resonant, echoed around him. "What is faith?" Elijah steadied himself. Faith is the belief in things unseen. The voice rumbled. Faith is more than belief. It is action. It is transformation. Without works, belief is an empty shell. The temple doors swung open, revealing a vast chamber filled with mirrors. In each mirror, Elijah saw a different version of himself, one filled with doubt, one filled with arrogance, one filled with fear. The voice whispered again, "Know thyself, and you shall know God." Then, as quickly as it had begun, the vision shattered. Elijah was back in the cave, breathless. The guardian watched him closely. "What did you see?" he asked. Elijah's voice was hoarse. "I saw myself." The guardian nodded. "Then you were ready." He stepped aside, gesturing toward the scrolls. "Take what you can carry. But know this, what you have learned here is not for the world to use lightly. It must be lived, not merely spoken." Elijah and Marcus exchanged a look. Then, carefully, they began selecting the scrolls they could take, knowing that the knowledge within them would change their lives forever. And perhaps, in time, change the world itself. Elijah and Marcus carefully wrapped the scrolls in cloth, their hands trembling as they secured the sacred texts in their packs. The guardian watched them in silence, his face still concealed beneath the hood. "You carry not just words, but the weight of their meaning," he said. "Do you understand what this knowledge will demand of you?" Elijah swallowed hard. "We do," he said, "but the world needs to know the truth." The guardian's voice remained calm but firm. Truth is a double-edged sword. In the wrong hands, it has been used to enslave just as often as to liberate. "What makes you think the world is ready for it now?" Marcus hesitated. "Is anyone ever truly ready for the truth?" A long silence stretched between them. Then, the guardian took a step forward and reached into his robes, producing a small, intricately carved wooden box. "Then let this be your final lesson." He handed the box to Elijah, who opened it cautiously. Inside, resting on a bed of deep blue fabric, was a single, ancient key. "This key," the guardian explained, "opens the last chamber within this cave, a place where the most sacred of the lost teachings remain hidden." Elijah exchanged a glance with Marcus, their breath quickening. "More scrolls?" Elijah asked. The guardian shook his head. "No, what lies beyond is not written knowledge, but something far more dangerous, truth that cannot be debated, cannot be twisted. What lies beyond is revelation itself." Elijah felt his grip tighten on the key. The weight of the choice before him was suffocating. "If we enter," Marcus asked cautiously, "what happens?" The guardian's voice was grave. "Then you will have to make a choice. Knowledge kept is knowledge protected, but knowledge shared can never be taken back. Once the world sees, it cannot unsee, and that will change everything." The final chamber, the air grew heavier as Elijah and Marcus descended deeper into the cavern. The key clutched tightly in Elijah's hand. The walls were smoother here, as if shaped not by human hands but by something beyond comprehension. At last, they reached a massive stone door, its surface carved with symbols that seemed to pulse faintly in the dim torchlight. Elijah took a deep breath, inserting the key into a small, nearly imperceptible slot. With a deep, resonant groan, the door slid open. Inside, there was no pile of scrolls, no ancient relics. Instead, a single pedestal stood in the center of the room. Upon it, encased in what appeared to be crystal, was an object, a small, shimmering stone that seemed to glow with an inner light. Marcus exhaled sharply. "What is that?" Elijah approached the pedestal, his heart pounding. The light within the stone flickered, and as he gazed into it, he felt something stir inside his mind. A voice. No, not a voice, something deeper. A knowing. It was not knowledge written in ink, nor spoken by a teacher. It was understanding itself. He saw visions, images of the past, of the present, of possibilities not yet realized. He saw the moment Jesus spoke these truths to his closest followers. Saw the fear in their eyes as they understood what it meant. He saw the centuries of silence that followed, the quiet war between those who sought to preserve these teachings and those who sought to bury them. And then, he saw the future, a world where the truth was revealed, where people no longer sought salvation through institutions, but through their own inner connection with the divine, a world where the barriers of religion, Power and hierarchy crumbled, leaving only pure understanding. It was a beautiful vision, and a terrifying one. Elijah staggered back, his breath ragged. "Marcus," he gasped. This is more than knowledge. This is truth in its purest form." Marcus hesitated, then stepped forward, touching the crystal. His eyes widened as the same flood of visions overtook him. After a long moment, he pulled away, his face pale. "If the world saw this," he whispered, "everything would change." Elijah nodded. "Yes, but are they ready?" The burden of truth. They stood in silence for what felt like an eternity. Finally, Marcus broke the silence. "If we leave this here, no one will ever know. But if we take it," Elijah exhaled slowly, "then we risk everything. The church, the governments, the very fabric of society. They will not accept this truth." The weight of the decision pressed down on them like a great stone. After a long pause, Elijah reached out and slowly, gently, placed the key back on the pedestal. "We are not meant to force this truth upon the world," he said. "Not yet." Marcus looked at him, conflicted but understanding. "Then what do we do?" Elijah turned to him, his expression resolute. "We take what we have learned, and we live it. We teach not by words alone, but by example. And when the world is ready, the truth will find its way." They stepped back, allowing the massive stone door to slide shut once more, sealing away the revelation that could change everything. As they emerged from the cave, the first light of dawn stretched across the sky, painting the horizon in hues of gold and crimson. Elijah looked up, feeling the weight of their choice settle upon him. Perhaps the world was not ready for the full truth, but one day, it would be. And when that day came, those who sought truth would find it, not in books, not in temples, but within themselves. For the greatest revelation of all had never been lost. It had only been forgotten.